Boom, what's up everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. Very excited to be talking about media, live streams, drones, and so much more. We have Eddie Codel joining us on the show. Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on, Eddie. We're really excited for this episode. You and Ron have been great friends for a long time, and I'm really glad to have been introduced to you and your long time of work in this field. We're really excited to unpack this together. For those who don't know, Eddie Codel is a media and live stream producer, drone pilot, and founder of the Flying Robot International Film Festival. And you can find the links in the bio below to eddie.com, as well as his YouTube channel and his Twitter profile. Eddie, let's start things off with one of our favorite questions to ask our guests. What are your thoughts on the direction of our world?
Direction of our world. It's rotational, right? Don't we revolve around the sun? I think it's an orbit direction. I mean, that's the trite answer, but that's the scientific answer. I think we're going to survive the fucked up shit that's going on in the world right now. I want to believe that the institutions that we have created will outlast the individuals who inhabit them, and so I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the key principles that we need to embody to make sure that we make it?
Compassion, understanding, going to other places. So I think a big problem with people, with Americans, is we don't travel. We get so locked up in our own world that I feel like, being able to understand other people really is the big thing.
Yeah, that's huge. We recently also learned that about apparently 1.3 out of the 1.4 billion people in China also haven't left China yet. So it's kind of
correct. And I don't mean to just say being very U.S. centric. I'm not. I can't really speak for the rest of the world, but obviously, there's a lot of people who don't even have the opportunity to do so. But I think those who have the ability to affect the way this world can. I think climate change is the biggest issue we have facing us right now, and the U.S. is going to be one of the countries that's instrumental in deciding how that fate is going to play out, and so we do have a lot of responsibility in how we proceed. Yeah.
Ron, is our logo is from not moving on center screen?
Oh my God!
Ronnie,
is the world stopping?
Let's get that logo. There it is. I love it. Okay, so that was on direction of our world. Let's do journey. Okay, so actually you told me you were born in London, which is really interesting. You spent the first 5 years there.
First 5 years in Europe, but not in London.
In Europe.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I was really young at the time, so I don't remember a whole lot. But so I was in London for a year. I was in Switzerland, Geneva for I think a couple of years, and then in Denmark for a period of time. So my mother's Danish, my father is an American. They met in Africa in the 60s. They had me in the late 60s in London. My dad was a journalist for the Associated Press at the time. He was an international correspondent. So he had just been relocated to the London office at the time that I was born. And then at some point we ended up moving to Geneva. I think he ended up his job ended up moving him there. So moved there. My sister was born there, and then at some point we came back to the States when I was around 4 or 5. Lived with my grandparents down in Florida at the time, West Palm Beach. And that's the only time I've ever lived there or been there actually. But then we moved up to the Northern Virginia, D.C. area when I was 5 years old. And that's where I grew up, is Arlington, Virginia, northern D.C. area. And I was there until I moved out here in '97. So all my school and everything was out there.
And then, so what were some of those key moments that's an interesting story of your mom and dad meeting in Africa.
That's a whole nother, we don't want to go and I don't have all the facts 100% correct on that, but I can quickly say that my father was in the Peace Corps, and then he was a journalist, both in Africa and Nigeria, and in the Congo, actually. The Congo is where he was, where he met my mother, where he was working as a journalist, and my mother was there at the time as well. But there was a dictator that took over at some point, and so a lot of the Western press was basically was told to leave after Mobutu took over power in whatever year that was, 67, 68 or something.
Whoa.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. Like, my parents have a really interesting, sordid beginning to their life, and then after I came along, they became really boring.
Wait, but how did, in DC, what was going on with you growing up that got you interested in art and film?
I don't know. I mean, I've always been kind of, artistically inclined, I guess, or just been, into the arts. Like when, after I graduated college, I worked at the alternative weekly newspaper in DC for 4 years, running. I was actually running their network, so I was a bit of a nerd, and I knew computer stuff. So I was the guy running their. I was the system administrator, which is what they call DevOps these days, and the webmaster at the time. So basically managing the whole infrastructure, the technical infrastructure for the newspaper. And actually, just as a quick aside, that's how I ended up coming to California.
Yeah.
So my boss at the time, who also was our company, the Washington City paper was the paper I'm talking about, and it was also owned by the owners of the City paper also owned the Chicago Reader at the time. And my boss, who was one of the owners of the Reader, sent me out to California to a desktop publishing conference in 1996 or so. And that was my first time coming to California, and I was like, immediately I knew, I'd already known prior to that I probably was a West Coast inclined person. And so I came out here and I did the full 3-4 week drive around the state, camp, explore kind of thing. And after the conference was over, and I knew immediately that I was going to, it was going to happen. It was so a year later it happened. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, it's a beautiful way to do it is to come here and do the whole 4 weeks of going around the state and seeing its beauty, and also just like you said, that desktop publishing conference was here. It was the cutting edge.
Right at the time.
Here at the time. And so then you wanted to kind of gravitated towards that edge and wanting to be here and seeing what Silicon Valley was going to emerge next.
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was, there was kind of a confluence of all the things that were interesting to me at the time. West Coast, beautiful environment, laid back culture.
No snow.
No snow, that's true. The winters and the summers were a lot more reasonable in most parts of the state here.
Yes.
The history of the 60s and sort of the countercultural movement in the Bay Area definitely spoke to me on some level. And then the internet, the rise of technology and the internet was definitely was all part of that. And so my first job coming out here was working for a web design company, and I was their sysadmin running their Unix systems and their the printers and things like that. And then and I ended up basically working at a number of companies like that, working as initially as a sysadmin, but then moving into back-end infrastructure architecture. So I worked as a systems engineer for a startup where we would, I think a bunch of different startups doing tech stuff until about, that has been kind of a thread throughout my whole existence. But in those early days, I was working as somebody who was staring at a screen pretty much all day long, and that kind of got old after a while. And I was like, I want something that's a little more exciting, a little more content-oriented, a little bit more, that's a shitty way to say it, but a little bit more, that had a little more, art to it, a little bit more excitement to it. And so, and I still love typing away on a screen for sure, but I didn't find hanging out in data centers, installing systems where this was a way that I wanted to spend a lot of my time.
And then what was going on in 97 to 2007 before you really got started with video production? What was happening in the Silicon Valley then, and what happened with the .com?
Right. Yeah. Well, my first job was at this web design studio I was telling you about, based in South Park here in San Francisco. And at the time, South Park was the home of it was Multimedia Gulch, is what it was called at the time. So at that time, or just prior to that time, the big industry was making CD-ROMs of anything you think of, of encyclopedias, Encarta, and multimedia sort of productions of rich content. That was the way to make rich content, was to basically, and when we say rich, we're talking about maybe 8-bit color on like a Mac Plus or something, the little fat Mac. I mean, this is light years away from what we have today, and but this is what the industry was at the time, was shrink rack packaged software. Experiences that were packaged on CD-ROMs. And so that was the area when that was happening. At the time that I showed up, the internet was just becoming a viable medium for for publishing and advertising, actually. So Wired Magazine was, right down the street, and I got to know a lot of friends who worked there over time. And at Wired and Organic, which was in the same building, they basically invented, they created the first website, created the first rich media websites, and then the first advertising, the first banner ads were created there as well. So sort of the beginning of the commercial web really, I think, started in that neighborhood. And I was there to see a lot of that, and so I ended up working for companies that were building sites for the industry as it was emerging. So I was lucky to sort of participate and see a lot of the emergence of various startups. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley tech companies these days started right there in South Park. So Twitter, for example, started right there on South Park, as did Instagram. They actually out of the same offices, as a matter of fact. And so a lot of that, there was just a lot of kind of brain power and enthusiasm just located right in that 3-block area.
And taking us all the way to packaging the CD-ROMs and shrink wrap and sharing those around the world, and then the complexities around what we see now in 2019 is we don't always look back 10, 15 years at what companies used to be like, and that I think gives us a really unique idea into the journeys that people take and the journeys that these organizations end up taking over periods of more than a decade to try and provide the world with some sort of a utility, some sort of a good or service that makes the world better. And it's good to see it from that point. And that was also at the time that you started doing video production.
Actually, you know what? It's there's a part that I forgot to mention earlier when we were just discussing some things. One of the things I think that got me into the more artistic side of things was the Webzine conference, which was something that I was involved in starting in 1997, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, and then again in 2005. And what that was basically a day-long and eventually a 2-day-long conference on independent publishing on the internet. Mm-hmm. So we were, the initial idea is that we were kind of an antidote to the monetization of eyeballs. And the idea was, well, let's use the web for creativity, for storytelling, for things that aren't about necessarily making money, community. And and a lot of people who were part of those early webzines went on to create amazing things and big companies and whatever out of that. So I don't know if we totally won because ultimately capitalism still was the big attractor coming out of that. But ultimately, I think what I realized quickly when going to work in '97 was that there was this big push to kind of, as there is today, there's a lot of people who are coming into, San Francisco and Silicon Valley to make their fortune, work at a startup and make their six-digit salaries and hopefully cash out on an IPO or something. That sentiment was very much alive then as well, and I think what we were trying to do with Webzine is provide sort of an alternative to that, to say, hey, it doesn't have to always be about grinding out 60 hours, 80 hours a week to crank it on someone else's project that may or may not make you rich, but hey, maybe you can actually just do a side project, do something on your own that you're passionate about, and so that's really what Webzine was all about, was to create an avenue for that. And that is what got me into the more, I think, creative side of things, is Webzine, ultimately. So since we're talking about Webzine, I got to give 2 quick shout outs to my friend Ryan Janelle, who was the motion graphics creator of the intro that we just saw in the beginning there. He worked with me at that very first company that I worked at Phoenix Pop, and then has been a friend of mine and collaborator ever since at Webzines and in Flying Robot, actually. And then also Srini, who is most famous for creating the website unamerican.com, which was a sticker company. And basically they made click-type stickers that would say things like fuck work or, I can't even remember them all now, but basically there were slogans, right? And he kind of founded that and is the person who basically found the money to create the first webzine. Basically went to Adobe and said, hey, we got this great idea for our community conference. Can you give us some money for it? And Adobe was like, sure, sounds great. Here's $1,500. And so we threw a party for ourselves in 1997. This is kind of how it started. So thank you, Adobe.
I love that definitely tells a bit on the art and the community side, and also kind of tells a bit on the interest in decentralization and open sourcing and these types of mentalities that are now starting to rebubble up, kind of like the more counterculture movement, which in many ways I think is where hopefully that we're heading, and that we can bring together some of these unity mentalities with us. Then in 2006 you were telling us about the South Park area and how that was kind of this gulch of, what was it again? The
Multimedia Gulch.
Multimedia Gulch. And so you ended up producing a show called Lunch Meat.
Right. So Multimedia Gulch was really during the CD-ROM era, which I would say is more about the mid-90s, but Lunch Meat came around in 2005. So just to back up a little bit, I did a thing called Geek Entertainment TV, which I don't think I sent you any clips of that, but that was a web series that I started. This is with my friend and collaborator Irina Slutsky, who is the woman, this one right here actually.
On the right, and you're on the left, and then here's the three.
Right, so just a quick aside, Geek Entertainment TV was a 3 or 4 year project where we went around and interviewed interesting people, friends, startup individuals or whatever, at parties, and we were kind of more like the tongue-in-cheek, kind of Daily Show-esque, that's kind of where we sort of took our cues from in some ways, way of approaching this audience, right? And so in 2005, the both of us got hired by a company to make a video, to continue doing our show, but also to make new videos. And so one of the shows that we did was called Lunch Meat, Lunch Meat spelled EET, and it's meeting geeks over lunch was sort of
meeting geeks over lunch.
So I believe this is episode like number 12 or 13, and yeah, we were meeting the Twitter guys.
So that was Jack, Biz,
Evan. Biz,
Evan,
Jack, and Biz there. Yeah. So they were sort of.
And this was 2006.
This is 2006 at the time, right? So I think Noah had been pushed out, and this is in South Park. This is the office that also was the Instagram office later. And so yeah, this is 2006. So I think it hadn't even been a year yet that Twitter was around, and we just approached them and said, hey, can we do an interview on with you guys? And they said sure. And the sort of the format of the show was we would interview founders, and then we would do like an on-camera demo of whatever the product was. So that's what we did here. We interviewed these guys for about half the show, and then if you cut to the next clip.
And then this is so cool.
This is what Twitter looked like in 2006. I think late 2006. And this is Jack giving us a demo of Twitter at the time.
With his 90 followers.
90 followers, 123 friends. And at the time you had everybody showed up as a little icon on the side. There's a few interesting things here. DMing was this little drop-down box. SMS was a big thing at the time too. So you could actually text to 40404 and a username, and you could actually text to using basically text messaging to send to Twitter. And that eventually went away, but that was an integral part of it for so long. And and at the time, I think the main feed updated like once every few seconds or every few minutes. So there were updates when we were doing the interview because some of the other employees would go ahead and put a tweet in to sort of show us that something was coming up live. But as you can see, Blaine is one of the early creators of what I think was the first engineer there. So these are all early Twitter people.
I think what was really key in 2006, it looks like, is that people started wanting to take the pulse on what was happening on the planet and between humans.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of where these things emerged from, is wanting to get that.
Also, if you notice, the way these tweets are coming out, they're answering the prompt, what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Right?
Yeah.
Which is, so it was a way to prompt people, to get people to say something. And so if you look, most everything is in response to that question. Whereas today, people tweet anything and everything, usually promoting something.
Usually promotions.
Yeah.
Usually promotions.
Or railing against something. Or
trying to awaken people with conscious content, stuff
sure,
like that.
There's plenty of things.
All different types of stuff.
Or demeaning Congress people. And
And then in
starting wars.
Or potentially getting the content out that shows the other perspective when it's trying to be squelched. So that's good too. What about what was happening in live streaming at this time? Because both you and Ron were getting involved with live streaming in the earlier days.
Right. So I got around, think of the time frame here. I worked for a startup company in 2001 called Fast Forward Networks that made scalable backend infrastructure for live stream technology. So basically it was a way to broadcast using the internet in a very efficient way. That company no longer exists. Our biggest competitor at the time was Akamai, which is now the 800-pound gorilla in that world. But that, and this is, again, when I was still more on the tech side of things. I didn't really have anything to do with content at the time. This was all, I was maintaining servers and building systems and helping to basically build out infrastructure that our technology was enabling. And but in 2005, I started getting into media production, and so we did Geek Entertainment TV for a few years, and then Lunch Meet, and then coming out of Lunch Meet, one of the people I interviewed was the CEO of Ustream at the time, John Hamm, and he basically offered me a job shortly after the interview, and I was like, that sounds cool, and I ended up working for Ustream for about a year, running their production services. So I was basically managing everything having to do with their live stream technology at the time, with event-based stuff. So.
And were you able to stream to a content delivery network?
Yeah, well, Ustream was a content delivery. It was their own CDN.
It was their own CDN.
Yeah. So Ustream was a technology enabler for live streaming, and it's basically like Twitch is today.
Yeah,
so
cool.
Twitch was Justin TV, which was a competitor of ours back in the day, and Ustream existed for many years actually before IBM finally bought them out like 2 years ago. So the technology still exists, but they are now IBM. I definitely had the coolest job at the time because my role was to basically, since I understood how to stream, I would take our platform and go to locations and stream an event. So for example, Zynga was like putting out a new Mafia Wars thing, and they wanted to blow up an armored truck in the middle of the Nevada desert, so we needed to live stream that, and it was going to be live streamed into the game somehow, so this was like a really high profile thing. At the last minute they say, oh, also we're going to have Snoop Dogg come out and actually push the button to blow up the truck. I'm like, cool. And so they sent me out to basically be the producer for this thing, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, 30, 40 miles outside of Las Vegas, where there's very little cell phone signal, but that's the only way we were able to actually get the video back, was using these LiveView backpacks.
Yeah.
And they existed back then, but they were they worked quite well. But the amount of data we were pushing was much smaller than today.
Yeah.
And and then we had Snoop come out, and I had to mic him up and everything, and then he. There's the countdown, and he pushed the button, and the armored truck blows up, and fake money goes everywhere. And anyway, so that was that kind of stuff. Then there was the 1 week tour also with the Sports Illustrated swimsuit models. So they were basically flying from New York to Las Vegas, and we had to live stream them doing a bunch of events. So they had me there as the person who was kind of the interface between the client and their own people. So just, it was a whirlwind year of experience. But I'd say I really got my chops into live streaming as a result of my time at Ustream.
And just in general, the idea of live streaming today is just so much a part of our nomenclature, especially in Silicon Valley. But then when you look at other parts of the world that still don't even have access to devices and the internet, they still have no idea what this is. This kind of reminds me of what it was like 10 years ago when you guys are like talking about live streaming and other people are like, what is that?
Right.
And so it's like the path of technological development in just 10 years is now multi-camera live streams to 2-3 CDNs, no problem.
Right.
Like this is crazy, the pace that these things are moving. You can see Ron's set behind Ron and all of the old tech that he still has from 20 plus years ago. And what we have now, it's just moving so fast. And one of the things that we also want to make sure is that when people learn skills, that those skills don't obsolete. Like if you had to spend a year at Ustream learning about how that technology works, at least some of the skills can be then taken with you and applied to future live streams and productions.
Oh, totally.
But if you learn just a specific tool, like if all of a sudden Adobe Creative Suite ended up not existing anymore, so many people that know how to use Premiere and Photoshop and all these tools would have to go and relearn how to use other tools. There'd be some carryover, but these are the things that we want to make sure that people are filling their essence with, that can actually be applied into later stages, just because tools expire so fast, technologies expire so fast now with these periods. And I also just want to mention with the lunch meets that you were doing and stuff, it's really interesting to be able to do things like look back and see how people behaved like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not saying that their ethics from 10 or 15 years ago are the same as they are now, because they're definitely not. They're humans. They've evolved 10, 15 years as humans, but you can still go back and enjoy. I actually highly recommend people, that video has like 15,000 views. It should have millions of views, because people should be interested in how people behaved back then that are running a company as big as they are now. So how about the Flying Robot International Film Festival? So you kind of did video production, live streaming, droning. You got into droning, and you had a cool video actually. You had the drone's eye view of the world on your channel. Right. One of them was Burning Man in 2013, which is really beautiful video. You've also taken videos of things like the Mission District here, Iceland, Cleveland, Portland, all these different cities as well. And then I guess you got so into droning that you were like, I'm going to start an international film festival around these flying robots.
So it's in 2013. I was at an event and I saw a friend of mine who had a drone shoot a video, and later, I was there at the time and he was flying the drone and capturing the footage. And I remember seeing the video later and being blown away by the simplicity and the beauty of what he was able to do with it. And I'm like, I got to get myself one of those. And so I ended up getting a drone in 2013. And back then, it was way different. Like things were not integrated into a cohesive system like they are now. So back then, you could buy a drone that could fly, but didn't have a camera on it. It didn't have telemetry. It could stay in the air and it could come home. That was the two biggest features of the original DJI Phantom 1. So this is the white drone, with the little legs on it. And so that's what I ended up taking the Burning Man that year to take that footage.
How did you attach a camera then?
So back in those days, what you had to do is you had to get a GoPro, and you had to put it on. If you wanted stable footage, you would put it on a gimbal. So a motorized gimbal, which again, these things are, you got the handheld ones that DJI makes. But at the time, these were third-party gimbals that you had to basically wire onto the drone yourself, and then you have to balance it with the camera and make sure that it would be balanced correctly so that the footage would look okay. And then not only that, once you had that all set up, you still had no way of actually seeing the video on a screen while you're flying. So you just kind of guess that you're doing it the right thing, which is exactly what I did at Burning Man.
Which ended up being great,
and then so then the next thing to do was to add that on. So you end up adding a video transmission system that takes the video out of the GoPro and sends it down to a receiver that you can see while flying. Now that stuff is all integrated in a cohesive system.
It's crazy.
But back then, you had to piece it all together. You had to know how to solder. You had to know how to go down rabbit holes of forums to figure out how to troubleshoot things. And I've always loved doing that kind of stuff, so it was a fun challenge for me. And then I immediately found other people that were doing the same thing, and brought it out to Burning Man 2013. Did that video, got 1.5 million views, I think, in the first week on YouTube. Kind of blew it up. I'm like, oh, maybe there's something here. Maybe I should do more of these. And any of my videos have not gotten anywhere close to the views that one had gotten. But it definitely opened my mind up to the possibilities and had me go down further. Oh, and then so the film festival came out of me wanting to see more of this stuff. Like I had done my own, but I knew that there were other people who were creating lots of drone videos, and we didn't have a drone film festival on the West Coast. So I'm like, okay, I want to start my own, and so I started Flying Robot, and then basically opened up submissions to anybody who wanted to submit from around the world, and made it free or super cheap, free I think at the beginning, and it's still very inexpensive. I think it's like $10-15 is the last fee that we would charge, for the last festival that we had done. But did it 3 years in a row, and
2015, 16, 17.
Yes. and it's been on hiatus since.
But coming back.
I do want to bring it back, but you know,
we want you to bring it back.
I know a lot of people want me to bring it back. I'm definitely inspired to bring it back, but the realities are, you know, sponsors, funding.
That's right. It's a hard work.
Yeah, and finding other people who are willing to work on the project. And
let's get DJI. Let's get them to sponsor.
Well, DJI was a sponsor 2 years for the second festival, but they weren't a money sponsor, and that's the thing. A lot of people are willing to give you gear, but I found after the first year it was harder to get people to actually cough up cash. So getting that kind of dialed in more, because there is a real, you know, actual cost that are involved during the festival. You know, even though it is a very lean festival compared to some other film festivals around the world, you know, we do it at the Roxy Theater here in San Francisco, which is fairly inexpensive. Yeah. The platform to process everything on is basically free, and the
hey, yo, Eddie, next time you need some money, you just come see me. I got a guy.
You got a guy? All right. What do I gotta give up for that?
Don't worry about it. Just let me know. I'll take care of you. We'll get you a festival.
All right, sounds good. And it's definitely not something that like a VC would want to fund, and it's not something I would want to take VC funding for, because like there's no way you're gonna take a film festival and make it, you know, into like you know, Sundance or something.
Yes,
right?
yes.
I can talk to Paulie.
Talk to who?
Paulie.
Paulie Shore?
Never mind.
All right, you're trying to make yeah, let's move on. But nonetheless, yeah, I definitely would love to keep it going, but it's at this point, it's not going to happen this year. We'll have to reevaluate whether it's going to happen next year. I would love for it to happen again next year, and I'm definitely thinking hard and fast about it, and we'll certainly make an announcement if and when it will happen.
Awesome, and hopefully there are people that are either watching or that are involved in the space that want to help make flying robot film festivals happen around the world. I think it's a great idea.
I would love to federate it. Yeah, that'd be great.
It's a great idea. Like you said, when you first can see the perspective of the drone that's flying while you're flying it, you're like, oh my God, there's so much more to life than just me being in my body and looking.
Totally. Yeah.
And then that awakening is so valuable. And then if you can make it into fun games that people can play, fun videos that people can make. And actually, we have the winner of the 2017. Yeah,
let's go ahead. Just before you get into that, I wanted to say, so you're kind of making a good point here where, you pause it, sorry. Yeah. So, you know, the perspective and the fun aspect of drones also leads to drone racing, which is
very popular.
And we've had categories for that in the festival for a while now. But drone racing gives you that, just quickly, drone racing basically is you're wearing goggles and you're flying the drone as if you're sitting in the cockpit, which is way different than standing on the ground with a screen and doing a line of sight.
You're like in VR environment in the perspective of the drone. Yeah.
It's not quite true VR, but it does feel that way, because you are seeing camera input into your eyes directly with everything else being blocked out. But it is kind of a mono. It's a mono signal right now, but it's amazing because you know, if you look, there's tons of amazing what's called FPV, first-person view drone flyers on the internet right now.
They're so cool.
Those videos are amazing, right? These guys are so good at being able to fly and do acrobatic tricks and this whole stuff. And we'll get to this in a second, but as a result of that, I've gotten to know a lot of these drone you know, racers, and ended up starting a company with a few of them called X-Class. And so we are an organization that makes large-scale drones for drone racing, or we are a large-scale drone race league. So we have specs on how to build them, and then people build them, and then we have races that people can come to and be a part of. Yeah. So that's another tangent in the drone world that I've kind of gone down. But anyway, let's get back to the creativity stuff.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. The democratization of the drone technologies for creative purposes. Yeah. FPV is so cool. Yeah. There's like people that are flying it in the Safari around like.
Totally, and that's only growing. Yeah. I mean, as again, quality of the cameras and the and the transmission systems get better. So what we're looking at here, shall I describe?
Please.
Yeah. This is a Bulgarian filmmaker who created this video, which is the one Best of Show in the last Flying Robot Film Festival, as well as the I think it was the LOL WTF category winner. So basically swept the awards that year. And it's a top-down view of this parkour guy basically running across all these amazing places in Bulgaria, and being very creative with it. That was a little kind of video game montage.
Yeah, that
it's
was
all
funny.
this top-down perspective, and it's to music. The music's actually pretty good on this, and then the perspective kind of changes on you too. Yeah, like you're looking at it, and you always think it's a top-down sort of thing, but then occasionally you'll see him do something different, and then it takes you for a few seconds to realize that it's actually not a top-down view anymore. It's actually a side view.
Side view,
Yeah, like when he climbs the building.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a brilliant film.
It's
I
so
love it.
good.
I never
It's
get
so
bored of
good.
watching it, and I think this just kind of epitomizes, the creativity that you can really do with
What's possible.
What's possible, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely it's good traditional filmmaking combined with acrobatics and. Here. This is the side shot I was talking about. So he's actually crawling up the side of
Up the side of a building.
Yeah, and it's framed upside down.
He's
actually
going down
but
the building,
but it basically
and
is
it's
just like
upside
taking
down.
the camera angle and warping it 90 degrees. And,
Wow.
but since your mind is already looking at it, it's top
Yeah.
down. You kind of think it's still the ground. So
Eddie, it's so important for us to get this rebirth back so that people can kind of crowdsource their creative ideas and submit them into the film festival, and then have flying robots and all the cool footage that has never been thought of be creatively brought back to the world. Like, who thinks about things like this? We need young people submitting this type of stuff to inspire us to have a different view on reality. Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you.
It's so,
make it happen again.
It's so important, yeah. Yeah, and we'll see how we can help. We really want to see this happen. Oh my God, the coins.
Right.
Yeah, there's so many interesting add-ons that people can do.
I mean, the thing is also, I think one of the challenges now too is because drones have become so ubiquitous and anybody can really buy one off the shelf or on Amazon or whatever. It's not hard to learn how to fly. I mean, obviously coming up with a creative idea and doing something interesting is the harder bar, and that's always fun to see what people can actually do. And so in some ways, because of the ubiquity of the technology and the tools, that offers a lot more people the potential to create something amazing.
Yes.
So that's great, but at the
Yes.
same time, it's just a lot more shit content that's also being created.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
that's
both,
fine. It's
yeah.
totally valid. People should be able to create whatever they want, but it just makes it a little harder to find, I think, the diamond in the rough sometimes.
That's 100% the case. We were just talking about that with a lot of passion, actually, the conversation between the democratization that's happening with the exponential technologies and the signal to noise ratio that's happening.
Right.
So how do you both enable the tech to be democratized, but then also stay very vigilant with what you consider signal, and making sure to uplift that further into the world? And that's a great question. It's a great thing to try and figure out, because there's so much noise that comes with the platforms being completely opened up the way that they have been. So, okay, so now we're talking like, droning has blown up so much that this has even made the government, the Federal Aviation Administration, try and figure out how the fuck they're going to handle this.
It's no longer the Wild Wild West. Yeah.
Yeah, so teach us about what this is like.
So in the early days, there were really no rules around drones specifically. And you could pretty much get away with flying anywhere and pretty much doing anything as long as nobody got hurt. Nobody really cared. Now, there's a lot more restrictions. You can't fly. There's just certain areas you just can't fly at all, such as national parks.
Airports?
Airports are verboten. Yeah. There originally were blanket no-fly zones around airports if you were a hobbyist or so. But now, if you're a commercial pilot, you can get authorization around certain parts of the airspace. So it's become a bit more nuanced and a bit more dialed in. So if you, let's say, need to do a shoot, east of the Oakland Airport or something like that, if it's like maybe a half a mile away, you could probably get authorization to do it because it's not going to be right in the flight path of the plane.
Yeah.
But there's an automated system now that basically creates kind of a segmented zone around every airport, every major airport.
Yeah.
And if you're within a zone that isn't directly affected by the flight path and you're a commercial pilot, you can usually get authorization for it. But it's taken a long time to get to that. Let's see, and obviously for good reason. Obviously, there's a lot of people who are just don't know what they're doing, and they're flying and getting close to airplanes, and as much hype as there's been around drones intersecting with airplanes, there's been maybe one, and it's even unclear if that's even. There was one, I think, collision with a Black Hawk helicopter or something like that, but there's been no actual reports of an airplane actually hitting a drone that's been proven. Right? There's been a lot of sightings and things like that, but so not to say that the danger isn't real, but I think the hype, especially because it's a new technology, tends to become greater than the reality of the actual danger.
The nuance with the national parks too will be important because you want people to naturally be able to explore national parks without hearing above, but also you want people that can't go to the national parks to be able to watch a pretty beautiful drone footage of that as well. So the nuance there.
And so I mean, and the answer to that is you have a permitting system, and that's supposed to be what's that happens with national parks. But there is no way to get a permit, from what I understand. They just deny them a blanket, even though they say that's the way to be able to fly in a national park is to get a permit. But unless you're like National Geographic or something like that, it's pretty much hard to make that happen.
What happens if you get caught doing it?
So it depends on what you get caught doing. If you get caught doing something that that's hurt somebody or created danger, where you're actually putting people in danger, then the FAA is going to be a lot more interested in what you're doing, and they're going to likely want to fine you. They have different levels of enforcement, but they can certainly fine you. A good amount of
hefty,
money. Hefty amount.
Yeah.
So and people have been fined. It definitely happens. And from what I understand, enforcement is supposed to actually become more prevalent than it has been up until now. So I think that's good for the most part because the government and regulators are getting some of those nuances. They understand that drones do have useful purposes. We're not just talking about filmmaking, but we're talking about search and rescue is actually a huge one. A lot of people's lives have been saved by drones finding them out in the wilderness somewhere.
Whoa! So if like in cases of maybe like avalanches or like
Absolutely.
Okay, so you can kind of like send a team of drones out to look for humans with maybe like thermal sensing or
exactly.
Like
Yeah, there are floor sensors, thermal sensors. So that's definitely used to find heat signatures of missing people. Elderly with Alzheimer's who go wandering out and leave their home and they go wandering out in the woods and don't know where they are.
Yeah,
that's happened. There's been several cases where people have been located who've under those conditions. And then I was going to say fires as well. So forest fires, huge one. You can kind of it's a way to again for search and rescue, but also to see from a bird's eye view where fires are, and structure fires especially. I think a lot of fire departments are now wanting to have drones because they can fly a drone over a structure and they can actually see where the hot spots are. They can find out exactly where to attack a fire with a lot more certainty than they could just by looking from the ground.
Yeah.
So that's becoming, I predict within 5 to 10 years, every fire department is going to have a drone for that purpose.
Yeah, in the amount of creativity that has yet to be unleashed by the power of drones being used across all these fields that you're listing. This is another one of the reasons why I think the Flying Robot Film Festival needs to become more popular and around the world.
Yeah.
And you'll have all these different cases. It's like you can have like an entrepreneurial arm as well of people that are trying to think about using drones for all these different ideas. I love that.
Yeah, totally. And we have a category, Drones for Good, which is good. It's exactly
That's
that.
excellent.
Where we highlight the positive uses. One of our winners from the first or second year is Zipline, and they are now one of the largest nonprofit organizations. I don't know if they're nonprofit. I think they are, but they're delivering blood and medicine to rural areas in Africa, in countries in Africa. So in a lot of developing countries, you've got horrible roads, and it'll take hours to get medical help into a village somewhere. But with what Zipline is doing in I think Uganda, and I'm probably getting the countries wrong, but they've got a few countries where they build these hubs, these spaceports, and they can just load up a bag of blood or medicine in the payload of a fixed-wing drone, and they've got all locals that are operating it too. They train local people there to run these things, and they package them, and they can have that stuff delivered within 30 minutes, pretty much anywhere. So.
And then what about? I feel like I should ask you about this before we get into the last video, which is that what should we do about like the ethics around and morals around how to use drones for benevolent purposes?
Right.
Using them for like autonomous war and
Right.
using them for all of these other things that we consider
Right.
ailments or issues.
Sure.
What do you think?
I mean, in some ways, I feel like it's similar to most other technologies that can be used for good or bad. I mean, it's interesting because drones, I think, in the collective consciousness, has been used for war fighting, for war and for killing people, and for the U.S. government using it to kill people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and things like that. That's one use that I'm definitely not a fan of, and I would not like to see that become its primary use. But at the same time, it is a technology that can be used for benevolent purposes and used for nefarious purposes. And like all technologies that can be used in that way, I think they need to be approached in a thoughtful manner and regulated in a way that that promotes the good over the bad. And it's a moral dilemma. I mean, obviously, because our own government is making drones that can be used to kill, I think we as a people have to take a look at that and say, is this the direction we want to go? And do we want to have an autonomous war battlefield? Is this the future? The future should be there are no wars, right? Obviously, but
yes.
But the reality is that's probably not going to be our near future.
A deep work on ourselves and our collective can potentially get us there.
Correct.
This is just a quick
the
example of the video of the barge that was flying around the Golden Gate Bridge airspace. Yeah.
So this is recent actually. Over July 4th, I was asked by a shipping company to fly a drone around this container ship that was coming into port, and there's 4 tugboats that are shooting water cannons around it. And it's kind of a salute to America is how this French company was positioning it. But they unfurled these American flags on the sides of the boat there and brought it under the Golden Gate. And so I was tasked with flying a drone around it. And for anybody who's wondering at home, this was not launched from the surrounding areas where it is illegal to launch from because it's all national park area, but it was launched from a moving boat. And so this is totally legal as long as you're doing it from a neutral area such as the water.
The water.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's critical. Make sure you do not get in trouble.
And actually, if you can, I don't know if you can scrub through this, Ron, but if you get to the point where it goes underneath the bridge, I do a fly around the other side of it, and that part gets a little more interesting. Yeah, so you can kind of see the tugs there, and then we go under the bridge. And you can probably let it play from here.
Gosh, those things are massive. We ship 90% of all world trade happens by sea, and all of those containers are filled with different materials from around the world. There's cars in there, there's goods from China,
right.
Plastics, all different types of, some people recycle cardboard back through those.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, it's true. This had just come up from LA, but I think it was destined for, somewhere Far East after that.
Those things are insane.
Yep. Ron, why don't you go ahead and just scrub a little bit further. I think once we get underneath the bridge there, I kind of come around the front of the boat, and that's a little more interesting. Here we go. See the little show they got going on. It's the first time I had ridden on a tugboat before, and that was a lot of fun. So I was on something similar to that.
Yeah.
That didn't have water shooting off of it, and that was pretty rad because not only was the boat being used to ferry us out there to be able to fly the drone, but it was a working tug. So after we were done with the shoot, the tug actually had to help push this boat into port in Portland, or sorry, in Oakland, the port of Oakland. And so there's the experience of, did it just jump to that?
That's the end.
Oh, okay, then maybe I didn't give the right one, but that's all right. So just seeing what a working tug does was pretty rad. I'd never really seen that experience. But basically the tug comes all the way to the very back of the boat, kisses the back of the boat, and they toss a line down. They tie the line, and basically the ship cuts its engines, and the tugboats are the ones that are kind of maneuvering it into
That's so
port.
interesting.
It's wild.
Yeah, those small things can move the big barge.
I mean, those things have massive engines, and they have like giant, I don't know, fins that go in the water. Like they can basically, they can break. Like they can actually take a multi-100-ton ship and basically break it to almost a standstill. 1 or 2 tons.
Very interesting.
It's insane. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Modern ingenuity.
Yeah, and so then those go always on the at the beginnings and ends of the trips.
So in the Bay Area, they're required to. Whenever a commercial ship comes into the Golden Gate, you have what are called pilots that meet them out like 11 miles out or so before they come into the gate. And the pilots are based in the Bay Area. They go out, they meet the ship, they actually climb up a rope ladder onto the ship, and then they take control of the helm. So they're the pilot in command.
Because they have so much experience bringing barges in and out of the bay itself.
There's a lot of traffic. There's areas that are dredged and areas that are not dredged. And so they just know exactly how the right path to take to get in and do it right. So because otherwise you've got captains that are obviously experienced, but they're not experienced necessarily with a high density area such as the Bay Area.
Exactly.
And nobody wants to have a ship.
Singapore is also.
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure this is common with probably all these ports.
Yeah. And then what about the most recent piece of content? Also, that was very recent, but this one too is very interesting. This is people playing Dungeons and Dragons behind bars.
Yes.
Yeah, and you also do this creative video production as well, and it's interesting that I also spent some time in jail, and when I did, I had a good amount of these experiences where I found meaning in these ways to build community around similar habits. And these are like creative, cooperative, trying to take the emotions of other people while you play these games.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very important piece of content, and you're also avid Dungeons and Dragons.
I haven't played D&D in a while, but I certainly used to when I was younger. Just the setup on that is a friend of mine, Elizabeth, she's a producer and a filmmaker for a lot of documentary work and television work. And so this has been a passion project of hers for a while to basically interview prisoners in and out of the California prison system about their use of playing D&D. And as it turns out, in certain prisons, they do this pretty regularly. And in some prisons, they've had to fight for the right to do that, because in some prisons they see it as as a form of play and they just take it all away. But the big benefits are collaborating, community, understanding people, having empathy, critical thinking, all these skills that once they get out of prison will help them not go back into prison ultimately, right?
Yes.
Basically, they're playing when they come out, and they're making connections, and they're engaged in something that is not what they did prior to getting thrown in jail. And I think in most prisons, they're set up in such a way to be punitive, not restorative or rehabilitative, at least in this country. And so that's why we have such a high recidivism rate in prisons, is that they come out and people have no idea what to do, right? They go back to their old ways because that's what they know. And so D&D helps to, and role playing in general, helps to give them another option or give them something else to focus on. And I think it remains to be seen, but there's a lot of evidence to show that that those that are playing D&D and really get involved in it don't go back to prison.
You want to watch the video?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
There's D&D at nearly every institution in California. Prisons are the most segregated places in the world. The D&D table is one of the few places where you could have blacks and whites playing together.
I see a lot of potential come out in people when they start playing these games. Being able to put themselves in someone else's shoes.
I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons in prison for 35 years.
I mean, we were hardcore. We'd play from as soon as we come back from breakfast to lockup.
My name is Elizabeth. I'm a documentary filmmaker and the creator of Let's Play, a film about the controversy around Dungeons and Dragons in the United States Department of Corrections.
So we used to run underground games with no books or anything.
We didn't actually have the actual books. We had these photocopies.
They took his dice, I think, and he sued to get possession of his dice and Dungeons and Dragons materials.
That is a homemade 20-sided dice.
In the process of interviewing and directing film shoots, I started to learn all about the world of Dungeons & Dragons behind bars. Dungeons & Dragons is one of the few activities that sprung up organically in the prison system that's helping inmates prepare for life on the outside. It's creative, it's cooperative, and it's a way for inmates to express and explore difficult emotions and trauma vicariously through role play.
You have to ask why we lock people up. And if the reason is for rehabilitation so that we get somebody who's going to be better on the other end, then D&D totally fits with that.
Thank you so much for supporting this campaign and for joining me in asking, does everybody have the right to game?
Yeah, so this is a Kickstarter project that just launched today for funding this documentary on called Let's Play, D&D Behind Bars. And so I myself, and Noel, who is a friend and partner from the Secret Alley, which is a space that I'm a part of, created the video. And yeah, it's live now, so they're trying to fund it. We've got about a month to go. But yeah, if you just go to Let's Play, or just go to Kickstarter and look for, or just probably have links in the bottom.
We'll put the link in the bio for everyone to go and check that out and back it on Kickstarter so we can get, like you said, decreased recidivism, more empathy, more cooperation, more creativity. There's so many studies of putting a rat inside of a cage without any games, and then if you put a rat inside of a cage that has different objects and things to play with, its neural infrastructure actually blossoms. The architecture grows better than if it's just constricted to nothing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it seems like common sense when you think about it. It's like if you lock people up and you don't have anything for them to do, then they're going to kind of lose their mind and they're not going to want to do anything. And if you do give them something to occupy their brain or something, that allows them to be functional in some way, then that's usually going to have a positive outcome. And
the second chances become more effective because they have went through these exercises more. Yeah, all this type of stuff, less recidivism. Okay, a couple other questions on the way out. I mean, I'm really excited for all your future content that you're going to be producing. Yeah, this type of stuff is great. The Let's Play, D&D Behind Bars, also drone content is going to be really exciting. The future of live streaming. Actually, I kind of want to ask you about that. What is the future of video production? Ron and I joke quite a bit that at some point there's probably not going to need to be an actual interviewer. There's always going to be something that's parsing, maybe just AI's talking. There's not going to be someone to be the technical director. It'll just be the cameras auto switching while people talk. There'll be just drones following you while you go about. I mean, there's so many of these different...
I hope I'm dead before that.
Yeah. What do you think about all these different things?
Sure. So you just have robots interviewing robots?
I don't know. Well, they have access to the internet, and we have access to just our wetware of our brain. I mean,
right.
I don't... Yeah.
Well, and then also, I mean, with facial recognition scanning and AI, there's probably been hearing stories about how these data sets have been, being leaked into like the Chinese army or something like that. They're being used to basically train their data sets to understand different faces. I could see that being, what's one vision of the future is that you've got robots that take on the personas of people that they've learned about through these data sets, and then other robots that are, interacting with them in some way. I mean, I don't think that's the future of filmmaking. Well, actually, one thing that's sort of interesting, I think, in a controversial way right now, is this whole idea of deep fakes.
Yeah.
Which is essentially the ability to create a video with somebody in it that looks and acts like the real person, but it's not that person at all. And so it's faking a video clip of somebody. I could see that being completely detrimental to, let's say, an election or something like that.
Truth.
Where you're right, exactly. Well, truth is already compromised in so many ways, but I mean, it just seems like another way to make truth even less findable, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my hope for the future of filmmaking, just quickly to sum up, I think, it's the technology keeps evolving. We get better cameras. We have better technology to switch shots. Certainly to better editing technology, and certainly AI that can mix things up and help with all that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think there needs to be a human behind it who can direct that creativity or tell that story, because ultimately any video content that's being created needs to have a story behind it. And if you're not telling a story, even if it's 5 seconds, like, what's the point?
Yeah. used for benevolence and ethical evolution, so that it's not used for malevolence. All this type of thing is so important, and hopefully that the future is more creatively enabling with these technologies erupting. Easier to find the signal, all these types of things.
Right.
Eddie, where do we come from beyond this 3D reality? Do we come from somewhere else into these Earth suits to play on the planet?
It's funny. I've been reading Michael Pollan's book recently, and I like his idea, his notion that maybe it's the mushroom aliens that have basically sent signal. That humans have grown from. I don't know if it's his idea necessarily, but he talks about it in his book. But that apes or pre-Homo sapiens have evolved into Homo sapiens because they ate some mushrooms or something, and then their brains started to,
the stoned ape theory.
Yeah, exactly, the stoned ape theory. So maybe that, but I don't know if that's helped us, because now we're now a thinking species that can basically wipe out the planet. So maybe that wasn't a good gamble by the aliens, but that's one theory, that we are just that we aren't, maybe it's a simulation, maybe it's maybe it is other beings that are playing a game, and we are merely, I guess I would make it a simulation, wouldn't it? I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. Sorry, I don't have a good answer for that.
I think you went across a lot of really interesting points there. You touched on a lot of interesting ones.
I was jumping around. I'm still learning. I'm trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah. Likewise, always a student of the universe, trying to get to the ultimate nature of reality. Is not just a physical planet orbiting a star. There is way more that's deeper than this that exists here. That we're not just don't just stay at the surface. Get deeper. Yeah.
And if you can, find another dimension to explore.
Yeah.
Go to, Earth in a different dimension and see what that looks like.
Even closing your eyes and just expanding yourself out of your own body is in itself just beyond what is your normal 5 sensory experience of life.
That's true.
Yeah, meditation gets you this, psychedelics get you there. There's all different types of ways up the mountain, connecting to nature. All these types of things can get you there.
Agreed.
And then how about, do you think we're in a simulation?
I used to think that it was an easy answer to say no, but now, I don't know, as I'm learning more, I think it's a distinct possibility that we could be. Or that we are in a simulation, and then we are just merely, but we have some autonomy as characters in that simulation. So maybe the stage and the setting is simulated, but we are just merely, we are beings with some limited amount of autonomy within that world. Kind of like, what's the movie where, what's his name? Space right now. What's his name?
Any ideas around the movie? Like what are the ideas of the movie?
Who am I thinking of? Jim Carrey. Okay, Jim Carrey plays the character. Who's like living. He's basically.
Oh, Truman Show.
Yes, Truman Show.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
great.
Yeah, like the Truman Show is basically a setting.
We're
in
just
which
being flipped through our channels.
Yeah.
Yeah. People are flipping through our channels.
We're the Truman Show.
Oh man, that's a great aspect to that conversational point as well. Agreed. And then, what do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
Being alive. Yeah.
And tell us more. Why?
Because if you're not alive, then you can't really appreciate nature and other humans and all the things that come from that. I mean, it's hard to say, because I've never experienced what it's like to be dead yet, so I don't know, or at least I don't, not that I can remember. So I guess maybe that's a very biased point of view, but I feel like being alive and allowing other beings to be alive is probably the most beautiful thing.
That there is something rather than nothing. It's nice. It's nice to be alive. Eddie, I love it. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Sure thing, Alan.
We
Wonderful.
really appreciate you coming.
It was wonderful to be on.
Good. I'm happy you had a
Thanks
good
for having
time.
me.
Yeah, huge thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below on the episode. Let us know what you're thinking about all these different fields we talked about. Talk more to your friends, families, coworkers, people online on social media about the role of video and art and film and drones, and also taking it to cool places like the prison system and being able to make great content like that, and submitting to cool festivals like the Flying Robot International Film Festival. Help that grow, help that explode. And also find the links in the bio, Eddie.com, the YouTube channel, the Twitter page, also that link to the Kickstarter project that will be down there too. Go and check that out. Shout out to Ron Vargas for producing and directing. Thank you very much, Ron. And also support the artists, entrepreneurs, the organizations around the world that you believe in, spiritual leaders, support them. Our links are below: Patreon, PayPal, cryptocurrency, design cool merchant, get paid, all that's below. And go and build the future. Manifest your dreams into the world. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Peace.